Imagine building the fastest growing movement in your nation's entire history.
Oh, that's the dream, right?
Right. I mean, you have the numbers, you have the funding, you've got this massive cultural influence,
Yeah.
and the sheer momentum of it all just feels, entirely unstoppable.
Like a freight train.
Exactly. You look at your dashboard and the metrics are just glowing. Everything is up and to the right.
Uh-huh.
And then someone pulls you aside, looks at your gorgeous spreadsheet, and tells you, you aren't actually growing, you're just inflating a dead body.
Wow. I mean, that is just a terrifying diagnosis.
It really is.
Because think about it, the very things we're trained to celebrate, like the rapid scaling, the massive crowds, the institutional expansion, those are often the exact mechanisms hiding a terminal disease.
Which is exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome to this deep dive. Today's mission is to unpack this incredibly profound framework about the nature of growth, leadership, and transformation.
Yeah, and the source material we're examining today focuses specifically on the Christian church in the Philippines, right at this critical, historic moment of expansion.
Right, but I want to be super clear here. The core questions and the warnings buried in this analysis, they apply to absolutely any movement.
Oh, totally. Any business, any nonprofit.
Yeah, or even like any personal endeavor you might be pouring your life into right now. Today, we're looking at the terrifying difference between an organization just getting bigger and an organization actually getting better.
Because the central thesis we're exploring is that human beings are remarkably skilled at, engineering the appearance of vitality.
We really are. We are so good at faking it.
We know exactly how to manufacture momentum. But manufacturing momentum and cultivating genuine, enduring life, those are two completely different things.
Absolutely. And I want to tie this directly to you, the listener. If you've ever felt that crushing, localized pressure to scale up your work.
Oh, man. The pressure to prove your legitimacy through visible metrics?
Exactly. Or to build an impressive image just to survive in your industry. This discussion is going to completely dismantle your definition of success.
It really flips the script.
It does. We're going to look at the psychological traps of ambition, the illusion of health, and the ultimate test that eventually exposes every single thing we build.
So to kick this off, we really have to start by recognizing the specific moment this movement is facing in the source text.
Right.
The framework describes an organization standing at a threshold.
Yeah.
And a threshold is not just, a doorway you walk through.
No, it's not just a transition.
It's an interrogation. The fundamental choice being made at this threshold is whether to build a machine designed for maximum reach or to cultivate a people capable of genuine witness.
That word threshold, it just carries so much weight because usually when a company or movement hits a major transition, we talk about it as a strategic threshold, right?
Like, how do we optimize this?
Exactly. How do we secure the next round of funding? Or how do we double our headcount without completely breaking our communication channels?
Right, it's all logistics.
But the argument here makes this brutal distinction between a strategic threshold and a spiritual threshold.
And that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Because a strategic threshold is fundamentally a logistical puzzle. It asks, how do we scale?
Assuming the product is already good.
Exactly. It assumes the core product is healthy and simply focuses on distribution. But a spiritual threshold, that is an existential crisis.
Yeah.
It asks, what kind of people must we become in order to survive the very success we're asking for?
Let's unpack that, because if you're manipulating the core metrics or if the culture is toxic, scaling up just scales the toxicity.
It amplifies it.
It's exactly like a Silicon Valley startup getting a massive Series C funding round.
Oh, great analogy.
Right. The founders might absolutely hate each other.
Oh.
The code base might be held together by duct tape and prayers.
And caffeine.
And caffeine, yes. And the user engagement might be completely artificial, just bought with unsustainable marketing spend.
Yeah, paying for clicks.
But then this massive influx of capital creates this huge aura of success. The funding round is the threshold, and instead of fixing the company, it simply funds the rotting core at a much larger scale.
It mirrors this dynamic perfectly, but with one terrifying difference.
What's that?
In the venture capital world, the market will eventually, inevitably correct you.
Right. You run out of money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You'll burn through the cash, or a competitor will expose your flawed product. But in a social, cultural, or spiritual movement, you can coast on a rotting foundation for decades.
Decades. Wow.
Yeah, you can sustain the illusion of health much longer because the metrics of success are so easily manipulated by human charisma and institutional momentum.
That is wild.
A threshold, in the historical and biblical sense used in the text, is a place of severe testing, that exposes what a group of people truly worships.
The history of these thresholds is honestly fascinating. The historical analysis points to these massive nation-defining moments, like the ancient Israelites standing at the edge of the Red Sea, or
Right.
later standing at the edge of Canaan.
Those are prime historical case studies of threshold testing. When you analyze the Exodus narrative, Israel is trapped at the Red Sea, Pharaoh's army is behind them, the water is in front of them.
It's a total dead end.
Humanly speaking, it is a logistical nightmare. But spiritually, that threshold was designed to force an entirely new psychology dependence.
Because they couldn't fight their way out.
Exactly. The deliverance was not going to come from their own military mastery. It required a complete surrender to divine initiative.
Wow.
But then, you fast forward 40 years, and they are at another threshold, the edge of Canaan. And the psychological test completely changes.
How so?
Well, they've learned dependence in the desert, right?
Yeah.
But stepping into prosperity and land ownership requires something much harder, which is obedience.
Oh, because prosperity is essentially a psychological anesthetic.
That's a great way to put it.
Like, when you have nothing, it's super easy to realize you need help. But the moment you gain territory, the moment the organization is fully funded and the buildings are bought, the success creates amnesia.
You forget how you got there.
You completely forget.
Precisely. Conquest without covenant inevitably becomes corruption. People can gain massive amounts of territory, whether that's geographical territory, market share, or cultural influence, and completely lose their foundational reverence at the exact same time.
And this is where the analysis introduces a concept that I find deeply unsettling.
Religious inflation.
Yes, let's pull that apart. So inflation, in a macroeconomic sense, happens when a central bank prints money without any underlying economic value to back it up.
Right. The supply goes up, but the value goes down.
Exactly. The supply of currency increases, so you feel like you have more money, but the purchasing power collapses. A loaf of bread suddenly costs $50. The value has been completely hollowed out.
Now apply that exact mechanism to a human movement. In this context, inflation happens when the multiplication of venues, events, or programs is completely separated from the deep, agonizing work of human transformation.
Or discipleship, as the text calls it.
Right. You get new communities launched, but they aren't deeply rooted. Leaders are given titles and platforms, but their interior character hasn't been formed at all.
It's all surface level.
Completely.
Yeah.
Activity just fills the organizational calendar, but the actual conscience of the people remains untouched.
So you're basically printing the currency of success, like more locations, more attendees, more revenue.
But the actual value of a transformed human life is plummeting.
That is such a vivid picture.
It creates a brilliant illusion of health. Because if you only look at the macro-level dashboard, the numbers are up. Everything looks fantastic.
But the substance is diluted.
Yeah, you're adding bodies to a room without forming souls. And the framework contrasts this dynamic by forcing a choice between two outcomes: fanfare and fruit.
Fanfare versus fruit. I really want to linger on this because it explains so much about our modern obsession with virality.
Oh, totally.
Fanfare is loud. It's a massive launch party. It's a trending hashtag. It's the announcement that we just opened 10 new locations.
But fanfare is entirely engineered. You can literally buy it.
You can. You can just hire a PR firm and manufacture fanfare.
And it attracts attention, sure, but it does absolutely nothing to sustain life. Fruit, on the other hand, cannot be manufactured.
It has to be grown.
It has to be cultivated organically. It requires soil, it requires seasons, it requires hiddenness, and it requires time.
Fanfare celebrates charisma and optics.
But fruit demands character and endurance. When any organization stands at a spiritual threshold, the deepest temptation is always to choose the fanfare of rapid expansion.
Because of the dopamine hit?
Exactly. It provides an immediate dopamine hit of validation, choosing the slow, quiet, enduring reality of fruit. That feels like losing the race.
Honestly, it feels invisible. Like, if I'm cultivating fruit, no one is reading a Forbes article about my explosive growth.
Nobody cares until harvest time.
Right. Which naturally leads us to question where the real work of a movement actually takes place. If scaling up for the sake of scaling is a psychological trap and fanfare is just noise, how does genuine change happen?
That's the million-dollar question.
And the framework points us entirely away from the national stage. It points us down into the dirt of the smallest possible local communities. It champions a vision to reach every barangay.
And for listeners who might be unfamiliar with the term, a barangay is the smallest social, administrative, and geographical unit in the Philippines.
It's like a neighborhood, right?
Yeah, a local district, sometimes just a collection of streets. It is the absolute micro level of society.
Now, I need to push back on this a bit because if I'm a CEO or a national leader, my brain immediately rebels against this idea.
Of course it does. It's not scalable in the traditional sense.
Right. Why on earth would I get bogged down in the micro level? A barangay is just a tiny geographic boundary on a map. We live in the age of fiber optic internet and satellite broadcasting.
Sure.
If you have a transformative message, why not just build a massive studio, put your most charismatic communicator on stage, and stream it in 4K to the entire nation simultaneously? Like, why embrace the agonizing friction of microgeography?
Because geography is not just logistics. Geography is theological.
What do you mean by that?
What's fascinating here is that a barangay isn't just a GPS coordinate. It is a dense, intricate social ecosystem.
Okay.
It's the exact location where human honor, shame, poverty, kinship, and loyalties are tested daily.
Real life.
Real life. It's where children are raised, where the elderly are neglected or cared for, where local corruption happens, where disputes over property are settled. If your message or your movement never physically enters the friction of the barangay, it remains an absolute abstraction.
It just hovers above real life like a corporate slogan.
Exactly.
Like, it sounds amazing, but it demands nothing.
The framework draws a brutal line here between coverage and presence.
Coverage versus presence. Okay, lay that out.
Coverage is a broadcast metric. It asks, have we reached the area? Did our signal penetrate that demographic? Did they see our ad?
That's classic marketing.
But presence is an incarnational metric. It asks, has a new way of life actually taken root in the soil of that community?
See, you can track coverage on a spreadsheet. You know exactly how many unique views your broadcast had. But presence has to be lived out. You can't automate it.
No, you can't. You can have a geographical area that is completely covered by a massive media campaign. Everyone knows the name of the movement.
I've seen the billboards.
But the people living in that area remain entirely unchanged in how they treat their neighbors. True transformation happens in kitchens.
Right.
It happens in tricycle rides. It happens in market stalls. And in the quiet, unscripted conversations long after the formal event has ended. The author makes this piercing observation: distance allows for abstract ministry.
Distance allows for abstract ministry. Man, that is devastating.
It's a huge indictment.
Because it's so easy to love a crowd from a brightly lit stage, you know? The crowd validates you, they cheer for you. But it is incredibly difficult to love a highly flawed neighbor in the messy reality of a barangay.
It requires actual sacrifice. The analysis highlights these microscopic acts of fidelity that, structurally speaking, are the actual tectonic plates of societal change.
Yeah. Give me some examples from the text.
It talks about a widow being cared for by her neighbors. It talks about teenagers sitting in a living room, holding each other accountable. It talks about a local father refusing to participate in a bribery scheme at his municipal job.
None of which are glamorous.
None of these things will ever make it onto a national organization's dashboard. No PR department is going to write a press release about a quiet prayer meeting in a humid living room.
But those unseen moments are the actual proof of concept. The danger here is that a massive national vision can easily devolve into territorial thinking, like a corporate land grab.
Yeah, staking your claim.
You just want to plant your flag in every city so you can say you're a national movement. But the goal isn't to occupy space. The goal is incarnational presence. The idea has to become flesh and blood.
If the movement does not embody the message at the micro level, the macro level expansion is nothing but colonization.
Wow.
It is expansion without transformation.
Okay, so deep, localized, embodied presence is the ultimate goal. I track with that. But let's look at the broader picture here.
Sure. If a whole nation actually needs to change, if we're talking about systemic corruption, massive economic disparity, or deeply entrenched institutional failures, doesn't an embodied movement eventually need to fix the national structures, the policies, the laws?
You would think so, right?
The framework gives a profoundly counterintuitive sequence for how national structural change actually works.
It states an uncompromising rule. National renewal must be spiritual before it can ever be structural.
Meaning what?
Meaning structure is always downstream from worship.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because if a culture fundamentally worships power or image or wealth, then even its most well-intentioned reforms will eventually just be weaponized to serve power, image, and wealth.
Exactly.
You can draft all the new oversight policies you want, you can bring in outside auditors, but if the foundational culture is rotting, the new structure will just rot in a slightly more sophisticated way.
It's inevitable. Because the human psychological default is to obsess over redesigning laws and processes. Why? Because structures feel controllable. Yes. We love a good reorg.
We do. If a company has a toxic culture, the board fires the CEO and changes the reporting structure. We draft a new policy. We create an ethics committee. We rebrand the core values and put them on a nice poster in the break room.
But reforming systems without regenerating the human heart is just pure performance art.
That's all it is. A deeply corrupt culture is incredibly adaptive. It will simply learn how to imitate accountability.
Like a proud institution will literally hire consultants to teach its executives how to speak the language of vulnerability and humility.
Right, they learn the vocabulary.
None of that is actual renewal. It's like putting a fresh coat of paint on a house with a collapsing foundation. The framework uses a phrase that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. A nation cannot be better than its worship.
It is a profound sociological truth. Whatever a society holds as its ultimate value, whatever it worships, will dictate the shape of its institutions.
So if the ultimate value is comfort,
Then the policies will ruthlessly protect comfort at the expense of the vulnerable. When you look at the historical records of the prophets of Israel, figures like Isaiah, Amos, or Jeremiah, they understood this sequence perfectly.
oh, this is a great point.
When the nation of Israel was facing imminent collapse, the prophets didn't petition the king for better administrative governance. They didn't propose a new organizational chart for the monarchy.
No, they didn't care about the org chart.
They demanded repentance. They demanded a fundamental reorientation of the heart.
Think about the vision of Ezekiel and the Valley of Dry Bones. It wasn't a management lesson about how to stack bones more efficiently.
Right. Let's organize these themers.
Yeah, exactly. It was a picture of divine resurrection. The Spirit actually had to breathe life into the dead material.
And we see this tension play out brilliantly in the early Christian church. If you look at the historical account in the book of Acts chapter 6, the early church is experiencing explosive growth.
Massive scaling.
And immediately, they hit a massive structural crisis. There's a deeply sensitive complaint about the daily distribution of food to widows.
Yeah, the Greek-speaking widows were being overlooked.
Right, so it is a logistical nightmare with massive cultural and ethnic implications.
It's a textbook structural problem. The
Okay.
organization is scaling faster than its supply chain.
But the response of the apostles is shocking to modern management theory. They refuse to abandon their core spiritual mandate, prayer, and the teaching of the word just to fix the logistical crisis.
Which feels irresponsible at first glance.
It does. But they didn't ignore the problem. They appointed qualified, spiritually mature people to handle the food distribution. But the leaders absolutely refused to let the urgent logistical crisis hollow out the spiritual center of the movement.
Spiritual vitality created the capacity for structural wisdom, not the other way around.
Exactly.
Because if the apostles had panicked, dropped everything, and become logistics managers just to fix the food lines, the immediate crisis would have been solved, but the church would have lost its soul.
It would have just become a food bank.
Right. Structure must follow life. It cannot produce life.
When leaders began to rely entirely on management technique to solve what are fundamentally spiritual or cultural problems, they eventually devolve into technicians of religion.
Technicians, wow.
Yeah, they learn how to run the machinery of the organization with incredible efficiency without actually being deeply alive themselves.
Which exposes a terrifying vulnerability. If structures are merely a reflection of the heart, and if the system is downstream from the spirit, then the leaders driving these massive movements are the single greatest point of failure.
Yes, the bottleneck is always the leader's heart.
If the leader's internal compass breaks, the entire structure eventually follows. And this forces us to examine the incredibly subtle battle between genuine calling and human ambition.
This is where the discernment required by the framework becomes razor sharp. It draws a stark contrast between a life that is sent and a life that is self-propelled.
Calling versus ambition.
Yes. And the terrifying part is that from the outside, they look almost identical.
Oh, they totally do.
Both can sound incredibly earnest. Both can produce massive momentum. Both can gather huge crowds. But only one of them is born out of obedience.
Let's ground this in the historical example the framework uses for pure ambition. The construction of the Tower of Babel in the book of Genesis.
Babel is the ultimate sociological blueprint for unified but toxic ambition.
How so?
Well, humanity is entirely unified. They're communicating perfectly. They have a shared technological goal. They say, come, Let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth.
Let us make a name for ourselves. That is the psychological core of ambition severed from obedience.
It's all about self-preservation.
It's driven by the terror of insignificance. The fear of being scattered and forgotten is what drives them to build a monument to their own capacity.
Their unity was not organized around truth or service or worship. It was unity forged in collective self-assertion. And that is the hallmark of ambition.
Now, let me play devil's advocate again, because for you listening right now, you likely have ambition.
Sure.
You want to advance in your career. You want to build a successful company. You want to provide for your family. Ambition isn't inherently evil, is it? I mean, even the text mentions the Apostle Paul talking about pressing on toward the goal and striving for a prize. When exactly does healthy drive curdle into toxic ambition?
That's a crucial distinction. Ambition, in the sense of desiring excellence, exercising your talents, or holding a holy aspiration to do good, is absolutely virtuous.
Right. We're not supposed to just sit on the couch.
No, not at all. The corruption happens when ambition is untethered from submission. Toxic ambition wants the throne before it has endured the cross.
Ooh.
It demands the platform before the character has been formed. Ambition produces incredible speed, but zero depth. Because it's fundamentally insecure, it creates a culture of anxiety. It requires constant, visible proof of its own legitimacy.
So the ambitious leader is always subtly saying, I must prove my worth.
Exactly. Whereas a genuine calling says, I must obey, regardless of the optics.
And this is why calling almost universally begins in profound hiddenness.
It always does.
Look at the historical patterns. Moses doesn't begin his leadership journey in Pharaoh's court. He spends 40 years in the absolute obscurity of the Midianite wilderness.
40 years.
David is anointed as the future king, but he doesn't storm the palace. He goes right back to the pasture to smell like sheep, and later spends years hiding in literal caves from a paranoid King Saul.
Yeah, he was a fugitive.
Mary receives the most profound calling in human history in the total socioeconomic obscurity of Nazareth. Jesus himself spends 30 years, the vast majority of his earthly life, in quiet, unrecorded manual labor before a 3-year public ministry.
Hiddenness is the crucible. Because if your identity is secured by a voice in the wilderness, you do not need the applause of a stadium to know that you exist.
That is so good.
You have the capacity to wait. You don't have to manufacture your own PR campaign to validate your calling.
But ambition cannot endure obscurity. To the ambitious mind, obscurity feels like death. It feels like wasted time. It triggers absolute panic.
And the most dangerous manifestation of this panic is what the framework defines as baptized ambition.
Baptized ambition, that phrase makes me wince.
It's so convicting, isn't it?
It really is. It's the psychological defense mechanism where we use sacred or noble vocabulary to camouflage our own ego.
It is incredibly common. A leader will use words like burden, vision, impact, passion project, or leaving a legacy.
All the buzzwords.
But underneath that socially acceptable language, the actual animating engine is profound insecurity or a desperate desire for control. They hijack sacred language to subsidize their own momentum.
So dangerous.
The danger here isn't an open scandal or rebellion. The danger is sophisticated spiritual theater.
Oh man, how often have I justified working 80-hour weeks and ignoring my family by calling it a passion for the mission, when in reality, I was just terrified of becoming irrelevant.
We all do it.
When baptized ambition takes the wheel, the entire compass of the organization shatters. The original mission mutates into something entirely different, which introduces the next major conceptual clash: vision versus vanity, and the illusion of institutional health.
The dividing line here is brilliantly simple. A vision becomes vanity the exact moment it stops being an altar and becomes a mirror.
An altar versus a mirror. We really have to unpack the mechanics of that.
Okay, so think about an altar. It's a place of sacrifice. You're offering something up. You're looking outward and upward.
Right.
A mirror, on the other hand, is entirely self-referential. You are only looking at yourself, adjusting your image, obsessing over how you are perceived by the audience.
True worship or true vision constantly asks, what is the right thing to do? What honors the core mission? Vanity asks only one question: how does this make us look?
Exactly. A movement driven by vision is completely willing to be corrected, to admit failure, to look weak if it means maintaining integrity.
But a movement driven by vanity.
It will protect its reputation at absolutely any cost. It will cover up abuse, it will silence whistleblowers, and it will manipulate data, all to protect the brand.
Jesus offered a ruthless critique of this exact psychological system when dealing with the religious leaders of his day.
The Pharisees.
Yeah. He told them they were obsessed with scrubbing the outside of the cup so it gleamed in the sunlight, while the inside was entirely full of greed, self-indulgence, and rotting bones.
They were absolute masters of institutional optics. They knew how to maintain a flawless, righteous surface while completely concealing the inner corruption.
This maps perfectly onto the corporate world. Think about a massive, publicly traded corporation that starts ruthlessly manipulating its stock price.
Okay, lay it out.
So the CEO initiates massive stock buybacks. By reducing the number of shares on the market, the earnings per share artificially skyrockets. The quarterly reports look phenomenal. Wall Street cheers.
Everyone's happy.
The executive team gets multi-million-dollar bonuses based on these metrics. But how did they fund the buybacks? By quietly gutting their research and development department.
Oh, wow.
They fired the engineers to pay off the shareholders. The metrics today look incredible, but the actual future of the company has been quietly murdered.
That exact dynamic destroys misaligned movements. You cut the R&D of the soul, the slow, hidden work of discipleship, accountability, and prayer, to fund the marketing of rapid expansion and massive events.
Because discipleship doesn't bump the stock price.
Right. The framework provides this chilling diagnostic list of how public success easily conceals private decay. It warns that you can reach a state where attendance is skyrocketing, but actual prayer is practically non-existent.
Yeah.
Financial giving is breaking records, but the moral character of the leaders is quietly eroding. Leadership pipelines are multiplying, but deep relational accountability has vanished.
You look at the spreadsheet, the graph is going up and to the right, and you are utterly convinced you are winning, while the floorboards are actively rotting beneath your feet.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the crucial insight here is realizing that the opposite of vanity is not sincerity.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Mm.
We tend to think that as long as we mean well, we are safe. But you can be sincerely busy, sincerely enthusiastic, and sincerely wrong.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
You can be deeply passionate about a misaligned goal. The true opposite of vanity is obedience. Vanity is obsessed with the optics of success. Obedience is concerned only with fidelity to the truth, even if it results in apparent failure.
Which forces us to confront the most terrifying question of this entire deep dive.
Which is?
If an organization can successfully fake it, if the crowds are massive, the budget is overflowing, and the leaders are universally praised, how is the truth ever actually exposed? Like, if you can sustain the illusion of health for a decade, how do we ever know what is real?
We know because of the inevitable fire test.
The fire test.
The framework dismantles the cultural assumption that growth is a proof of God's favor. Often, rapid growth is not a blessing. It's merely a test of fidelity.
Because scale amplifies what already exists.
Exactly. Scale does not change the nature of a thing. Scale simply magnifies whatever is already present in the foundation. If your foundational culture is built on pride, scaling up gives you a massive, highly efficient engine of pride.
But if your culture is built on deep, quiet prayer, scaling amplifies that.
Right. But eventually, the pressure of reality hits the structure.
The framework leans heavily on a warning written by the Apostle Paul in his first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 3.
Yes. Paul uses the metaphor of an architect or a builder. He establishes that the foundation has already been laid, which is Christ. But then he says the materials each person uses to build upon that foundation vary wildly.
Two totally different categories of materials.
Right. On one side, you can build with gold, silver, and precious stones. On the other side, you can build with wood, hay, and straw. And Paul warns that the true quality of every builder's work will eventually be revealed by fire.
And fire in this context is the pressure test of reality.
Mm.
Fire is a global economic crisis. Fire is a public criticism or a targeted cancellation campaign. Fire is the sudden onset of suffering, a pandemic, or simply the slow, grinding friction of time.
The most profound element of this metaphor is understanding the function of the fire. The fire does not create the fragility of the building. The fire merely reveals the fragility that was there the entire time.
It just exposes it.
Let's look at the materials. Wood, hay, and straw are incredibly cheap. They are abundant. You can gather massive quantities of them with very little effort. If your goal is to build the largest possible structure in the shortest possible time to impress the neighbors, you will absolutely use wood, hay, and straw.
It creates massive volume quickly.
But it is highly combustible. The moment a spark hits it, the massive volume turns to ash.
Exactly. Now look at gold, silver, and precious stones. You cannot gather them quickly.
No, you have to dig for them in the dark.
It requires immense labor, time, and friction just to extract a handful. You will never build a massive skyline-dominating skyscraper out of solid gold in a week. Your progress will look incredibly slow compared to the guy building with hay.
But when the fire sweeps through the valley.
The gold and silver do not burn. The fire actually purifies them.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Whether you are leading a corporate team, scaling a startup, running a nonprofit, or just trying to build a healthy family, you have to realize that you cannot fix foundational problems by simply getting bigger.
If your foundation is pride and exhaustion, scaling up just gives you a bigger platform of pride and exhaustion.
Yes. If your leadership style relies on corner cutting, manipulation, and burning out your employees, securing a larger market share won't fix that. It just makes your eventual collapse vastly more expensive and damaging to more people.
This is exactly why the framework is so uncompromising about protecting the spiritual and emotional life of an organization at every single level, especially during periods of expansion.
It demands that leaders receive deep soul care, not just highly optimized calendar management.
It demands that local churches or communities prioritize deep theological and character formation, not just slick, highly produced event planning.
It insists that institutional networks enforce deep, agonizing accountability, rather than just cheering for massive expansion goals.
It specifically targets the phenomenon of rushed leadership as the ultimate structural fragility.
Rush leadership is the inevitable byproduct of building with wood, hay, and straw.
How does that happen?
Well, when an organization is scaling rapidly, it develops an insatiable appetite for human capital. It simply needs bodies to fill the slots on the organizational chart.
Right.
Consequently, it begins to promote people based on the system's urgency rather than the individual's actual maturity. The machine needs managers faster than souls can actually be formed.
So you hand a 25-year-old an enormous platform, a microphone, and a massive budget because they have charisma, completely ignoring the fact that they haven't developed the character to carry that weight.
And we rebrand that negligence as empowerment.
Wow.
But when you give an immature leader a platform without the slow, hidden work of formation, you are not empowering them. You are actively endangering them. You are strapping them to a rocket without a parachute.
You guarantee the future collapse of the movement because the entire superstructure is resting on the shoulders of individuals who literally do not have the structural integrity to bear the weight.
It always comes back to formation over flash. You cannot hack human transformation.
You really can't.
The framework relentlessly forces the question, what kind of people are we becoming? Are we building an ecosystem that produces passive consumers of religious or corporate content, or are we forming deeply rooted disciples?
Are we measuring our fruit by actual transformation and resilience, or are we measuring it by the volume of applause?
An organization with world-class logistics but a hollow core will eventually be crushed under the weight of its own success.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today, and the implications of this are staggering. We started by looking at the seductive danger of vanity metrics, how a dashboard showing everything going up and to the right can completely blind us to the murky, rotting reality beneath the surface.
We unpack the absolute necessity of grassroots, incarnational presence through the every Barangay concept, proving that abstract, broadcasted influence is no substitute for local friction.
We examine the illusion of structural reform, recognizing that new policies are useless if the underlying worship of the culture remains fixed on power or image.
We dissected the terrifying, subtle shift from genuine calling, which thrives in hiddenness, to baptized ambition, which requires a stage and constantly manufactures its own legitimacy.
And finally, we confronted the ultimate reality of the fire test. The fire that burns away the cheap combustible volume of our rushed efforts, leaving only the dense, hard-won gold of genuine obedience and character.
It is a total paradigm shift. It takes the entire modern playbook of blitzscaling and explosive growth and exposes it as a potential suicide mission.
The source material leaves us with one final, deeply centering metaphor to anchor this entire philosophy. It pulls from the Gospel of John, chapter 15, where Jesus tells his followers, "I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me, and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing." The ultimate contrast here is between a machine and a vine.
A machine versus a vine.
Let's break that down as we close.
A machine is a triumph of human engineering. It produces massive activity, it is highly efficient, it is loud, and it can run 247. But a machine is fundamentally dead. It has no internal life.
Right.
A vine, by contrast, is an organic reality. It produces fruit not through mechanical exertion, but simply because it is alive. Abiding in the vine, which means staying deeply, quietly connected to the source through humility, prayer, and hidden obedience, is agonizingly slow.
It does not look impressive.
No, it doesn't generate quarterly hype. But it is the only process that produces, as the text says, fruit that remains. The calling is to be a living branch, not a frantic manufacturer.
You cannot manufacture life. You can only position yourself to receive it and bear it.
That is the definitive measure of success. Not how tall the tower was built, but what kind of humans were formed in the process.
As we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to look directly at you, the listener, and leave you with a final thought to carry with you. The concepts we dissected today focus heavily on how leaders and massive movements must learn to embrace hiddenness, to choose the slow, unglamorous work of character over the intoxicating rush of the spotlight.
Yeah.
But I want you to apply this to the specific spreadsheet of your own life right now. Think about the metrics you use to judge yourself. What if the wilderness seasons you are currently agonizing over the periods in your career, your education, or your personal life where you feel totally stagnant, entirely unseen, or even like you are falling behind your peers? What if those seasons are not a glitch in the system?
What if they're the point?
Exactly. What if they are actually the only atmospheric conditions under which your capacity for true character can be formed? What if the obscurity you are so desperately trying to escape right now is the exact structural reinforcement, the slow mining of gold, silver, and precious stones that you will absolutely need to survive the fire of your future success?
We despise the murky waters of waiting.
We want the clean, sharp, binary line of the graph telling us we are winning today. But maybe the muddy, unglamorous, hidden waters are exactly where your real foundation is being poured.
That is the hidden grace of the threshold. You are being prepared in the dark so that you do not collapse under the immense weight of the success you have been asking for.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the metrics that drive you, keep looking past the polished surface, and keep digging deeper.